מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בנוטש ירביצני ימי מנוחות ינחלני, נפשי שובב ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי הלך בגץ המוות לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. תשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדיפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. I've chanted for you the words of our 23rd Psalm. As we seek comfort and strength on our most difficult days, we often turn to the psalmist. And so I ask you now to recite these words with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. When it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. So long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us as we remember Morton Frankel. To his children, Debbie, Steve, Mitch, Rick, Janet, and Rob, also to Michael, Debbie, Sue, Chuck, and Alex, to his sister Sylvia, and to his grandchildren, Dan, Lisa, David, Gardner, Josh, Darren, Alex, Robbie, Teddy, Lake, and Henry, also to Angela, Jason, Jordan, Katie, and Marie, and to his 4 great-grandchildren, Sebastian, JJ, Blake, and Taylor, to all of the members of the family and to so many dear friends who have come together. We've gathered today to remember, but also to celebrate the life of your beloved Mort. Our sages in their wisdom have taught us that birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity and from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude and pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Mort's journey of more than 94 years began on January 10th, 1924, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He was the youngest of 3 children born to Ada and Sam Frankel. His mother was born in New York City, and his father was from a small town in Russia. When Mort's father was just 15 years old, he fled Russia in hopes of escaping religious persecution, and in seeking a better life, Sam Frankel came here with nothing. He and his young bride, Ada, were poor but hard-working people. The work ethic that Mort saw and knew as a boy and teenager, this is what shaped him and molded him into the man that he would become. When Mort was just 2 years old, his family moved to Mansfield, Ohio, where his parents established the Mansfield Plate and Window Glass Company. Mort and his older siblings, his brother Jules of blessed memory, who everyone knew as Sonny, and his sister Sylvia, who resides in Sarasota, Florida, and is watching our service today via live stream. This close-knit family made their way through some of the most difficult and challenging times in our nation's history. And to his sister Sylvia, who watches, and who will be celebrating her 100th birthday next month. Sylvia, I know that everyone who is gathered here today, we all join together in sending you our most sincere condolences on this loss. In Mansfield, Mort and his family lived in a rural area. He and his sister rode a horse to school. He delivered newspapers, and he was a Boy Scout who proudly achieved the level of Eagle Scout. In speaking with the family yesterday, I met Mort's youngest grandchild, Henry, who will be entering the 4th grade this fall. Now, Henry, you shared a really interesting story with me that I'm sure your mom told you. You told me that your grandfather, who you called Poppy, that he taught himself how to drive the family pickup truck when he was 11 years old so that he could drive himself to Boy Scout meetings. And as an 11-year-old, he would drive this truck with his right foot on the gas and his left foot on the brake, and your Poppy somehow got away with this. And for the rest of his driving years, this is how Mort Frankel drove. 2-footed. Mort played football at Mansfield Senior High School, and following his graduation in 1942, he matriculated to The Ohio State University. Mort joined the ZBT fraternity, where he cultivated many great friendships. These college brothers grew into lifelong friendships. And Mort continued his studies in Columbus, attending law school at OSU. He practiced law for 1 year and then began working in one of the family businesses, Scharf Glass, located in Canton, Ohio. Mort met Janet Frankel, a single mother of 3, through mutual friends. A courtship ensued, and 18 months later, on October 27th, 1968, they married. Their wedding date remains so significant in the hearts of their family because this October 27th, exactly 50 years after Janet and Mort were married, their grandson, David, will marry his bride, Jordan, in Arizona. Debbie, in recalling Mort, you remember a man, and these are your exact words, Debbie. You said you remember a man who stepped into a full house and never hesitated. For you, Debbie, and your brothers, Steve and Mitch, you said that Mort was there, and he wasn't just physically there. He really tried to be present. Steve, you remember that he did not use the prefix step before referring to a son or a daughter. He said, we were his children. And you, Mitch, you remember the love and the respect that he showed to you and your brother and your sister, but you really remember the love that you saw between your mom and him. And you vividly remember the laughter and the fun times that they shared. A few years into their marriage, their son Rick was born, and Mort, lovingly and gracefully, instantly was a father of 4. Rick, you recall a dad who was a hard-working man. Each morning, he was ready and out of the house by 7:30 a.m., returning home at 6 p.m., enjoying dinner with the family, reading his newspaper before retiring for the evening. This was his routine. But when it came time for family vacations, this always merited his undivided attention. Rick and Mitch and Steve and Debbie, you saw your parents as a sweet couple who loved spending time with family, especially if that time involved golf or skiing, and who also cherished the time they spent together as a couple. They loved to travel, went to Mexico and Canada and Florida to visit Mort's parents, your grandparents, and they loved entertaining at the home in Shaker Heights and then the home in Pepper Pike. They were blessed to have many wonderful friends. And at far too young an age, we know that your mom, Janet, became ill. She battled cancer, and in 1976, just 8 years into their marriage, she succumbed to this disease. Through his sorrow and his great loss, Mort knew that he needed to gather all the strength he could as a single father of 4. And in the words of his children, he was not afraid of this. We have a word in our tradition, it's a Yiddish word, to describe someone who is able to rise up, to be the best possible human, and to do the right thing. We wear this word as a crown. The word is mensch, and this is what Mort was, truly a mensch. Rob and Janet, your mom, Carol Schenza, was introduced to Mort through mutual friends. After a brief courtship, they married. This was on January 6, 1978. And whether you called him Dad or Uncle Mort, you both eventually called him Dad. He was a wonderful father to you. As a couple, you remember how they loved to dance. Mort was a great dancer, and they traveled all over the world, Australia and Spain and Portugal and Morocco. They were part of a Federation mission to Russia to help and meet with refuseniks, and they took Rob and Rick with them on a trip to Israel. And on 9/11, Mort and Carol were on a plane flying from London to New York when the catastrophic tragedy struck our country. They were diverted to Canada, where they were welcomed and stayed until planes were once again allowed to fly. Mort and Carol had a special group of friends. I know many of you are here today. And I know that they love to get together with couples to celebrate anniversaries and other milestones. And even more than this, Mort loved the family celebrations, the celebrations of his 6 children and their spouses and their children, all the weddings, the bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvah. And if you weren't married yet, Mort had his not-so-subtle way of making his point. While Mitch and Sue were dating, they'd often go out to dinner with Mort and Carol, and finally one night Mort said to Mitch in front of Sue, "When are you going to marry her already?" Sue was certain if it wasn't for Mort, they'd still be dating. Rob, you shared that your dad had this great inner strength, and he also possessed a wonderful sense of humor. With this inner strength, though, he also had this outward strength. He was strong physically, every morning doing his push-ups and his sit-ups. And Janet, you described your dad as an enormous role model who enriched all of our lives. You said he was always there for you, and he was the dad who would make you train for a skiing trip that was coming up. He'd have you go through a regimen of daily squats and, I suppose, torture you in some way, but it was all with love to make sure that the skiing trip would be as wonderful as it could be. He said that he kept all of you laughing with his infectious laugh and his enormous, incredible sneeze. Mort and Carol were married for 37 years until the time of Carol's passing in 2015. If you knew Mort, you knew that he had a work ethic that was admirable and strong. He worked as the president of Frankelite, the company that he led for nearly 20 years. And throughout his adult life, he busied himself with philanthropic causes. He was a board member for both the Jewish Community Federation of Cleveland and Mount Sinai Foundation, and Mort served as the president of Menorah Park. How blessed was Mort Frankel? Blessed to see 11 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, we might say Kenahora. Henry, his 9-year-old grandson, loved coming to Cleveland to visit Poppy, and whether Poppy was telling you stories of the old days about driving trucks when you shouldn't be driving trucks, or just talking to you about golf, Henry, to you, you said he was the best grandfather ever. And Lake, his grandson, who's 10 years old, said that he enjoyed the visits to Cleveland, and he could tell, you told me, Blake, you could tell how much Grandpa Mort loved seeing you. And you also remarked that he liked to watch Hawaii Five-0. His oldest grandchildren shared stories as well. David has memories of golfing with his grandfather at Oakwood, loving the family visits, the dinners, the board games at the house, the fun times in the backyard. And Lisa, you enjoyed in more recent years taking your 2 daughters to Florida every year to visit him and have some wonderful quality time. The visits in Cleveland for Lisa, for David, and Dan were always centered around Grandpa Mort and Grandma C and being at their house having fun. Dan, you remember the basement of that house where your grandpa tried to teach you billiards in their basement. And to honor him, when your son JJ was born about 7 years ago, you gave JJ the Hebrew name that Mort also bears, the name of Mordechai. With Josh and Darren and Alex, his in-town grandsons, Mort had a special ritual. Before each of the boys began kindergarten, your grandparents would take you on the train ride in Peninsula and present you with your special kit of school supplies. Grandpa Mort would also join in on many of the family trips to Disney World. He'd meet up with his grandson Gardner and Gardner's parents, Steve and Debbie, at Disney. And all the other grandchildren were able to have fun times with him in Florida or at Disney, or perhaps it was on an airboat going through the Everglades to find alligators, or visits to the wolf sanctuary, or stops at the Naples Zoo. Mitch and Sue and their 3 boys, along with Janet, enjoyed a wonderful cruise through Alaska with Mort and Carol. Darren, you remember about 3 years ago, when your grandfather was 91 years old, you went golfing. I'm going to quote Darren as he said in a very Talmudic way, "The dude put me to shame on the golf course." 18 holes, and your 91-year-old grandfather beat you. But you and your brothers, you remember the dinners at their home, the weekly dinners on Ainsworth, the basement that was filled with toys and Legos and Hot Wheels, and these were all very special and sweet memories. We have a tradition, a saying, that tells us words which come from the heart enter directly to the heart. And today, Mort's son Mitch has words in his heart that he wants to share with all of us. So I'd like to call on him now, and I believe his son Darren is going to accompany him.
As you heard, we have a complex family, as many do in the world today. My parents, Janet Frankel, daughter of David and Ida Frankel, owners of Frankelite, and my father was Ernest Rolls, were married and had 3 children. Me, my brother Steve, my sister Debbie Feiner. When I was about 8, as you heard, my parents divorced. My mother then met a man from Canton who worked in his family glass business, Morton Frankel. No relation to her, but Mort moved to Cleveland, joined Frankelite in our family, and we moved from Sulgrave and Shaker Heights to Ainsworth and Pepper Pike. Mort and Jan had my half-brother Rick together and shared a short but loving time together. When I was 17, my mother, Mort's wife, Jan, succumbed to her battle with cancer. Shortly thereafter, my brother Steve and I changed our last names to Frankel. Debbie was already married and a Feiner. Mort met Carol Schenza, a widow whose husband Stan had died, leaving her with 2 young children, my step-siblings, Robert and Janet. 2 were married and were together for over 37 years. They moved to Fairwood in Pepper Pike, then 3 Village, spent time traveling, golfing, enjoying their lives in Cleveland and Naples, Florida. They made many lifelong friends in Florida and Cleveland, traveled many times for humanitarian aid reasons to places such as Israel, Russia, and fun places like Aspen and Snowmass for skiing, Alaska, Australia, New Zealand. Mort and Carol, as you heard, were among those stuck in Canada after 9/11, along with the Laters and the Singers. They were in the air when the Twin Towers were hit. The 2 were always on their way to a meeting for philanthropic causes, whether as president of Manoa Park or board meetings for JFSA, Plan, or Jewish Federation. Helping others less fortunate was on the top of their list. When Carol succumbed to an 8-year battle with cancer in January of 2015, we had to rally the troops, get Mort to Cleveland for the funeral, and help him as he had helped so many others. As his healthcare power of attorney in Cleveland, I had no idea the extent of his health issues, and he did not want to burden anyone with them or even recognize them. Prostate cancer, kidney problems, dementia, congestive heart failure were all issues he and we had to deal with the help of his primary care doctor and friend, David Rosenberg. We were told he had less than 6 months to live, and several doctors said we should put him in hospice. Mort was too strong for that. With all his ailments, he maintained a sense of humor and a desire to live. All along the journey, I sort of had the ice cream test. So long as Mort wanted his chocolate ice cream and took his medications, I knew he wanted to continue living. At one point, he was in the hospital and he asked the urologist, Dr. DeVilli, if he really needed a nephrostomy tube inserted into his kidney to help him drain. The doctor asked him, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" Mort looked at him with a smile on his face and he said, I want to live. So he had the procedure and he lived for over 3.5 more years, way longer than predicted. Life without Carol was much changed. There were no longer winters in Naples, Florida, no longer someone around to make the dinner plans with friends, to make sure he got to his destinations, and no one to be around as his full-time friend and companion. Mort's health was failing, and he was very frustrated that he could not do the things he used to do. He especially missed playing golf. We tried to fill in with Sunday dinners at Mayfield Country Club, full-time caregivers, and frequent visits from family, but it was just not the same. As to full-time caregivers, I cannot say enough about the dedication of Dee Cochran and Passion Private Home Health Care. Dee and her staff did not miss a day in the 3.5 years of service, kept him dignified and happy until the end. And what was the beginning of what we believed was the end of a strong fight to live, 2 years ago we started slipping some antidepressants into Mort's mix. About 8 days later, he went out and completed his first 9 holes of golf of the summer, went home, opened the mail, which he hadn't done in a year and a half, and started reading his emails on the computer, which he hadn't touched in a year and a half either. I was elated, thinking we had really turned a corner in his care and rehabilitation. Unfortunately, only 2 days later, he wound up in a Hoosier hospital again for a 9-day stint that really weakened him. But we had the one great day, and for that I'm grateful. It was to be one of many runs to a Hoosier hospital room over the 3.5 years. 2 broken hips repaired by my U.S. classmate Britt Schroyer, trips for urology and nephrology, and because of his dementia, each time was like the first trip. For Mort, he would ask, "Why am I here? Why can't I go home?" Each time I would remind him, say like, "You just broke your hip, you couldn't get up." And he'd say, "Oh," and he'd smile and wink at me. He continued to walk to the amazement of the orthopedic surgeons and others. Continued to go out to lunch and dinner, to dress sharp, to smile, to enjoy the company of others, and to think about others. He loved the visits from his out-of-town family and friends. I thank his friends for keeping up the calls and visits during Mort's difficult times. His long-term memory was all there, and he remembered each of you fondly and loved hearing from you and visiting with you. He lived in the moment, as do all those with dementia, and still had his sense of humor and smile. The difficulty for him was if you asked him about his day, Mort no longer had the ability to remember, and it would be a short call because he couldn't take it. He would, as many of you recognize, reminisce about old times, and he enjoyed doing that. So today I have reminisced about some of the difficult times, some of the good times. I'll try to remember him always by the good times. I'll miss our Saturday brunches, our Sunday dinners.
The man who always taught my father to ski, to golf, become involved in the community, to give back to it, and the importance of one's reputation, is an honest and caring person of integrity. He will always also remember him as the man who pushed him to get off the fence and marry the love of his life for over 33 years. Thank you. We'll miss you.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining, ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. Yesh kochavim she'oram magia arza, רק כאשר הם עצמם עבדו ונם. יש אנשים שזיו זכרם מאיר, כאשר הם עצמם אינם עוד בתוכנו. אורות אליך מבהיקים בחשכת הליל, הם שמראים לאדם את הדרך, as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. As you are able, I invite you to rise for the words of the El Male, the memorial prayer. אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, עמסי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. את נשמת מרדכי בן שמואל, שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן, תחי מנוחתו. אנא ברחמים אסתירהו, בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. O merciful God, who dwells on high, who is full of compassion, grant perfect rest beneath the shelter of your divine presence among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament. To our dear departed Morton Frankel, who will be remembered in the household of Israel by the name Mordechai ben Shmuel ve'eda. To Mort, who is gone now to his eternal home, may his soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life, and grant that his memory inspire all of us to noble and consecrated living. And to this we say, Amen. Please be seated. Just a couple announcements to share with you. Our service will continue at the Lakeview Cemetery, and following the interment, the family will receive visitors at the Three Village Reception Room, located at 5150 Three Village Drive in Lyndhurst. Visitation will be until 9 p.m. this evening. Also, anyone wishing to make a contribution in memory of Mort, the family has suggested that you might consider either the Mort and Carol Frankel Music Fund at Menorah Park or the Jewish Community Federation of Cleveland. On behalf of the entire family, we thank you for your love and support on this sad but important day.